You look at, again, your parts process. So parts are cash. Number one thing I would ask every parts manager is, what's your turns? How important is to know your turns? All right. How often should parts turn? Anybody know the answer to that? It's actually changed over the years. So 3 times is a great number if it's your money. What happens if the manufacturer's money and they've given you dating on your parts order and you've got till June to sell it? So do we really care if our parts turn 3 times if it's the manufacturer's money? Not at all. So I tell people again, this has changed a lot. You know, we used to think, gosh, the manufacturers, we buy parts, you know, in 30 or 60 days I had to pay for them. A lot of the manufacturers today, Jack, yours is probably a little bit different in your industry because of what you do, but a lot of the manufacturers today, if you buy a spring order or a preseason order, you know, you can buy your order, you get 180 days of dating, so you don't really have to pay for the parts till here. So maybe I only turn those parts a couple of times a year. Right? So as long if I'm working with Nathan's money, I don't really care how many times I turn Nathan's money, but the time it turns, when it becomes not Nathan's money anymore, but my money, and I've got it in inventory, I want to try to have 3 turns on it. If you don't have 3 turns on something, does it mean you should send it back? Maybe. I tell people again, there are some parts that are complex to get, harder to get. I may have only 1 turn on of the year. I sell it to my own shop. I just move my margins up to offset the lack of turns I have on it. So if I was getting a 35% margin before, and I'm only turning it once a year, but I still want to keep it in stock, I might move that margin up to 50 or 55%. Right? Does that make sense? So I tell people again, if the turns go down, it may be what we call a mission critical part that's hard to get, or it's expensive to ship in. I may still keep 1 in stock, but I'm not going to sell it at 30% or 35% margin. Now I'm going to sell it to the shop at 50 or 55% margin. And by the way, does the shop really care what you charge them for a part? No. I just want you to have the what? I tell people again, I don't care what you charge me for the part. Just give me the what? Give me the part. I'll build the part into the job. We can make that happen. How do you handle your daily stocking order? You know how most dealers handle their daily stocking order? Well, the box comes in from UPS or FedEx. It sets there because you're busy in the morning, and then before you know it, at about noon when you get ready to put it up, what do you notice happened to your box? It's been opened. Okay? And now what do we have to do? We have to find it. Okay? So I tell people again, so how do you handle that daily stocking order? You know, and it seems simple, but you guys all know in parts how complicated. All of a sudden you get really busy out there, but you got to have a process in place for that. What's your process for special orders? So when you need something you don't have, what's our process for dealing with that? How do we order it? Who's responsible for calling the customer? Where do we put it when it comes in? Right? Do they pay for it or not pay for it in advance? So you need that process in place. It's so very clear when somebody does a special order, then you have in your parts process, this is what we do. This is how it's handled. So anybody should be able to do that. How's inventory counts handled? How many of you guys are doing cycle counts on your inventory? Very good. Okay, why do we do cycle counts? Why not just wait till the end of the year and have a big party? Yeah, because again, number one is you start losing track of it. We have shrinkage someplace. It's 12 months before I know I've got shrinkage. If I'm doing cycle counts, then if there's something that's going wrong, I can catch it early. So you do your cycle counts based upon the turns that you have in your parts, on your parts. So you run a parts report out of your business management software, parts sales by volume, and you take your 50 or 60 fastest moving parts, and you're going to inventory those every 90 days. Why would we inventory our fastest moving parts more regularly? On a more consistent basis, because that's probably where you're going to have shrinkage at. If I got a part that only turns 3 times a year, I don't need to inventory it every 90 days. But if I got a part that turns 12 or 15 times a year, then I want to stay on top of that inventory. So we do cycle counts. And so again, how's that going to be handled? How many of you guys are using Lister or Stanley Vidmar cabinets, the high density parts cabinets? Okay, so you do that based upon the parts cabinets. You have your fastest moving parts, typically closest to where? You want to have those as far away from the parts counter as you can have them, or as close to the parts counter. Okay, why not? Because all your people need exercise. Put them in the back. Put them back by the shop. Make them go back and get those. So you have those there, and then your fastest moving parts are put in those cabinets, and then we have a cycle count on those cabinets. Right? Your bigger parts typically are in the back. You don't sell them as often, so you go back and walk back for them. But you need a process set up for that. I don't want to do a full inventory every year if I'm a parts manager, but I want to have a completed inventory done every year. But I don't want to take one time during the year and do it all. I want to be doing it as I go through it. Right? So at the end of the year, I've inventoried everything at least once. My fast-moving stuff, I'll probably inventory 2 or 3 times as we go through the process. But who's going to do that? And if you're the parts manager and you have other parts people, I don't want you doing it. Okay, you've got plenty of other stuff to do as the parts manager, do what you're doing there. And then who's responsible for pricing updates and matrices? So who does that? How do you know that your prices are current? As we have this economy heating up, you're going to start seeing prices are going to go up. When people start paying people $15 or $18 an hour, how do we do that in business? How do we pay people more money? Thank you very much. We have to do what? We charge more. So I tell you, one of the things you're going to see in 2018, 2019 is you're going to start seeing these pricing things tweak up on you a little bit. And you got to have somebody that's on top of that. There's nothing worse than having a price update that's 90 days out and all of a sudden you're losing 2 or 3% because you're still selling it back here instead of up here. So who's responsible for that? And then who's responsible for going in and tweaking out the matrices? Do you all use some sort of pricing matrix as a part of your pricing strategy, your parts pricing strategy? How many of you guys are just selling it for what the manufacturer tells you to sell it for? Okay, all right, so you shouldn't. Those are called manufacturer suggested what? Retail prices. The key word in that is what? Suggested. And we don't like the what? Suggestion. Okay, so I tell people again, so we're going to matrix those parts up to get us where we need to be. Now, you're all going to be a little different on that, but again, our goal is to maximize that. You know, if you're doing $500,000 worth of part sales and you can tweak another 1 to 2% margins out of your parts, you're picking up an extra $5,000 to $10,000 of net profit. And you have to be cautious when you're doing matrixing because there are some parts that are price sensitive. Would you all agree? So we don't matrix those, but we take things that are not price sensitive and we move those up. That's called velocity pricing. So we go back and we have matrices and we go back to our matrices and then we relook at parts because if you've got like lubricants as an example, lubricants tend to be pretty price sensitive. Grease tends to be pretty price sensitive. So in most of my dealerships, we actually move those down a little bit below MSRP and then we would go move up product that's not price sensitive up higher than we did on the matrix to offset our loss of cost on those. That's called velocity pricing. So again, but that's something I normally expect my parts manager to be doing. I don't want anybody in there tweaking that out other than my parts manager or an owner. Okay, because sometimes when your parts people look at what you're selling parts for and what you're buying them for, they think you're taking advantage of people, right? So my job is to buy it right as a manager and to price it out so that we're competitive in the marketplace with it. So those are the things you've got to have, just some parts of your processes you have to have there.